welcome to the last ZEBx Decarb Lunch of 2024. My name is Natalie Douglas, and I'm the ZEBx Program Manager at the Zero Emissions Innovation Center, otherwise known as ZEEC. So today we're going to be hearing from two partners of ZEEC's BC Retrofit Accelerator, BC Nonprofit Housing Association, otherwise known as BCNPHA, and Aboriginal Housing Management Association, otherwise known as AHMA. They'll be talking about deep energy retrofits, some projects that they've worked on, and the important role that they play in the early stage of a building retrofit. If you're interested in getting continuing education credits for attending today, you can check the information that my colleague Carrie is going to drop into the chat. You can use the chat, as always, to ask questions for the presenters and the rest of the audience. We'll use some of those questions to help guide discussion near the end of the hour. And now to start things off in a good way, I'd also like to share my gratitude to be able to join today from the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations, and to honor the more than 290,000 Indigenous people and over 200 distinct First Nations that call BC home. I also want to give thanks to the City of Vancouver, Natural Resources Canada, and BC Hydro for their financial support for this free educational webinar series. As a final reminder, ZEBx is a part of a family of program areas nested within ZEEC, the BC contingent of the Low Carbon Cities Network. ZEBx specifically is part of the building decarbonization team and can be understood as the main convener and amplifier of content developed by this building decarb team. We're the first point of contact for those who are either unsure about how to approach the world of decarbonization or want to be updated really about everything. If you're interested in learning more about electrification, specifically building electrification, check out B2E, Near Zero for research and incentives, Carbon Leadership Forum BC for all things embodied carbon, and like many on the call today probably already know, the BC Retrofit Accelerator for all things retrofits. So ZEBx compiles and synthesizes content from all the specialist program areas to promote cross-program interdisciplinary work. Do note that ZEBx is also more than just the building decarb team, or ZEEC is more than just the building decarb team. We also have folks specializing in communications, economic transformation, granting, all working towards accelerating decarbonization. Now, as I introduce my co-host, my colleague Carrie is going to launch the first poll just to give us a sense of who is in the room today. And I'm very happy to be co-hosting today with my colleague, Darla Simpson, Program Manager at the BC Retrofit Accelerator. Darla is going to kick things off today by introducing herself, the intentions and scope of the BC Retrofit Accelerator, contextualize the importance of today's topic, and introduce our speakers from AHMA and NPHA. Over to you, Darla.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Natalie. I appreciate the chance to co-host this session with you today. Many of you may have heard about the BC Retrofit Accelerator, but basically it's an umbrella program with the intention of supporting a smooth transition of existing buildings to net zero carbon emissions in alignment with those provincial and local government climate action targets. So this work is seeded by Metro Vancouver Regional District, and they helped us create the vision for the BC Retrofit Accelerator. And then we were fortunate to secure funding through Natural Resources Canada, the Roadberg Foundation, and through ZEEC's own endowment fund to further support the development of this program or program area. And so there's a lot that falls under that umbrella. A few of the things here, advisory committees. Natalie mentioned our market transformation team, so they really support on the sustainable finance side of things. We have a fabulous capacity building team through ZEBx and B2E, and then we also have a research and innovation stream in partnership with the University of Victoria and independently within ZEEC. And then the programs that you're here to learn about today are those concierge programs that, again, we're able to support through that federal funding. So there's 4 different streams of the concierge programs. There's BOMA BC's Decarb Accelerator. The fabulous folks you're going to hear from today, BC Nonprofit Housing Association and Aboriginal Housing Management Association. In the nonprofit sector, we also partner with Landlord BC to deliver their market rental program. And on the residential strata side, we actually do that program in-house as well, in partnership with the Condominium Homeowners Association. And if you want to find out about any of these programs, or if you're just curious about the BC Retrofit Accelerator, you can go to ZEBx website, check under programs, and you can find out all about them. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any further questions. And so just to kind of frame up the conversation today, we get a lot of questions about, what is a deep retrofit? What is the zero over time model? What is the BC Retrofit Accelerator trying to achieve? So I just wanted to create a little bit of clarification around what we're talking about today. So the term deep energy retrofit, or generally is talking about retrofits that achieve a minimum of a 50% reduction in energy consumption and a minimum of 80 to 100% reduction in GHG emissions. So this is really supporting buildings to achieve those deeper energy retrofits and that net zero carbon emissions by 2050. So I just wanted to highlight the difference between a deep energy retrofit and a zero over time model. So the deep energy retrofit tends to be a one and done project. So it involves multiple building systems like the enclosure, maybe one or more mechanical systems. And it really is, I would say, the industry best practice for optimizing the whole building performance in one go. And so that's the ideal approach. But through the BC Retrofit Accelerator, one of the other approaches that we recognize is that some of our building owners need to do it in a more zero over time strategy. So that still has the whole building in mind, but the plan might be implemented over 3 or 4 different projects over time. And what this does is it just allows the program to align with the capital renewal projects or your capital planning in the building. And it allows you to achieve zero, but each project kind of moves you closer to zero. And so it kind of has that whole vision of how to achieve that deep energy retrofit, just doing it over again, 10 or 15 years, depending on what your renewal schedule looks like. So I know that our team today is going to get more into the details on this. I'm super excited to have them presenting. I'm going to let them introduce themselves because they've got a whole team approach to this, but we have Shahed Shabazand joining us from the Aboriginal Housing Management Association. We have Edward Beckett from BC Nonprofit Housing Association, and Atwan Archie is going to also present from the Aboriginal Housing Management Association. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Shahed.
So much, Darla. Hi, everyone. It's very nice to be here. Yes, I'm just going to very quickly introduce myself. So as Darla mentioned, I'm Shahed. I am an immigrant. My ancestors come from Iran, and I've been fortunate enough to live on this land as a guest. And I joined the Aboriginal Housing Management Association last year as an energy project advisor. So I work very closely with both Sarah and Atwan, and I'm very lucky to work with Edward very closely, on a lot of projects. So our work in our department tends to, yes, deal with a lot of energy projects and retrofits. So I'm also very grateful to have the background in engineering and working as an energy advisor to be able to, I guess, propel these projects forward. So really happy to be here with you all in this room. I will pass it on to Sarah, if that's okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Freeland. I'm the Manager of Engagement and Technical Services at the Aboriginal Housing Management Association. And I'm here really in a supportive role to make sure the slides move and jump in if there's any questions that my team's not able to answer. I'll pass it over to Atwan.
Wade, letting Atwan Archie and Squawk Cheskin as that when Saquat Muhulu. Hello, everybody. How are you? My name is Atwan Archie. I'm from the Shuswap First Nation, located in Canham Lake, but I'm residing here in Surrey, BC. I'm the manager of capital projects with AHMA, Aboriginal Housing Management Association, and oversee the team of our project managers, and we support and advocate with our societies to help deliver these kinds of projects. Thank you. I'll pass it on to who's next, Ed.
Thanks, Atwan. And I'm Edward Beckett, an energy manager with BC Nonprofit Housing Association. I've worked here for the past 4 years, supporting nonprofit housing societies and co-ops. Previously, I spent over a decade in the education sector, specializing in energy management and life safety projects. Alongside the asset management team at BCNPHA, I work with housing providers to secure funding and implement energy retrofit projects that look to improve energy efficiency and support affordability. Could pass it back to Shahed.
Thank you. Okay, so Darla, thank you, Darla, for briefly kind of introducing us to the world of deep energy retrofits. I will just very briefly kind of dive a bit deeper into what deep energy retrofits are, and maybe try to step away from the industry jargon a bit and for folks who may not be working in the industry. So as Darla briefly mentioned, generally speaking, deep energy retrofits tend to be more system-wide and holistic and substantial approaches to retrofitting a building. And by that, we really mean that when we take this approach, really trying to consider all the different building components and what their intricate and dynamic interactions and relationships are, so that as we come up with solutions, we make sure that changes in one are not really negatively impacting the other systems. So again, kind of trying to decolonize that language and stepping away from that industry jargon, it's really more of a very high level and complex approach to building retrofit. So when we take these approaches, it really helps us, in addition to increasing the efficiency of a building, really enhance the resiliency of the building, which really improves the quality of life for occupants and helps them become more resilient, of course, against crises like power outages, climate disasters, and even wildfires. So by improving the building envelope and the heating and cooling system and ventilation, we're really ensuring that the quality of the indoor air quality is improved. In addition to that, again, the building is a lot more resilient towards these climate disasters. Next slide, please. So you see probably a lot of technical details on this slide. I will try to, again, bring more of the human aspect of taking such an approach. So in a lot of our projects, a lot of times we try to incorporate the needs and priorities of tenants a lot when we take a deep energy retrofit aspect, and that's one of the big benefits, if you ask me, of a deep energy retrofit approach to projects. We use tools like the surface level requirement tool that you can see on the slide, and by using that, we really try to understand what the, again, priorities and needs of tenants are, because again, at the end of the day, those are the folks who are living in these buildings. So for example, by taking this approach, we really are able to add, for example, cooling and better ventilation in buildings. And again, considering with what's happening during the summers, this has been a very important thing for a lot of our members. And again, by improving all these different components of a building, in addition to, of course, reducing energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions, we're again creating building stock that is a lot more resilient for future use. And as many, again, sitting in this room may know, we know that 3/4 of the existing building stock in BC is still going to be in existing use by 2050. So it's vital for us to protect the existing buildings, so especially affordable housing stock, because again, we know that a lot of vulnerable tenants tend to live in this building. So, a lot of the approaches and measures that are taken in a deep energy retrofit, like improving insulation, adding more energy efficient mechanical systems like heat pumps, heat recovery ventilators, really help us to not only protect these housing stocks, but also, again, improve the indoor air quality for a lot of the tenants. And again, making the buildings a lot more climate resilient. So for our organization, AHMA, for example, serving urban Indigenous populations, this becomes a very vital step, because as we know, they tend to be a lot more vulnerable to extreme heat events and other climate disasters, again, because of systemic inequities stemming from colonization. So they tend to live in housing stocks that need a lot of more attention. And a lot of times you don't really have an any other solution, but to look at a deep energy retrofit because of all the complex issues that a lot of these buildings are facing. So saying all of that, I think we can hear that it's a great investment, actually, although they tend to be complex projects. It is a great investment to protect the well-being of tenants, but also reducing operational costs and help you plan for your portfolio in the future. And with that, I will pass it on to Edward to continue. Thank you.
Thanks, Shahad. All right, so now let's stop and take a high-level look at what a deep energy retrofit process may look like. Now, it's important to note that every organization's pathway will look a bit different, especially in the nonprofit sector. Staff capacity and past experience with retrofit projects will vary from organization to organization, and this could have a big impact. But here's a typical retrofit process that BCNPHA and AHMA usually follow. And before we get deeper into this, it's important to think about these different stages. Each one of them here has different costs and risks associated with them. And really, at BCNPHA and AHMA, the services we're providing through the BC Retrofit Accelerator aim to really support those early stages where the risk can be quite high. How can you justify to sink thousands of dollars into studies if you aren't sure what the outcome could be? And how can you really justify this to your board? So it's really about working with us in a coaching capacity to help initiate the project, and then working with development consultants and project managers to drive those deliverables later on. As well, it's also important to work with us to start the funding process, both determining which streams to target and identifying their deliverables. Next slide. So let's take a deeper look at the different parts of this process and who can help where. So the first stage, gathering and reviewing building data, well, that's like discovery. You're collecting and reviewing information about your buildings, their systems, and their energy use. We may be looking at one building or your entire portfolio. This stage is crucial to set the direction of your project and align your organization's vision with project outcomes. We'll also need to ensure the building and measures selected have potential to achieve high energy and greenhouse gas savings. This is what will help determine if your building is a good candidate for a deep energy retrofit, because the building you think may be your worst performer and most in need of a retrofit may actually not be. BCNPHA can help determine this potential through our benchmarking services, which provides an energy use profile for your buildings, giving you a way to compare how they're performing. Our energy specialists at BCNPHA and AHMA can work with you to review previous building materials like building condition assessments and previously done studies as part of this portfolio review. At BCNPHA, we even provide a no-cost opportunities assessment or energy audit that will provide information about your building systems, the remaining system life, a pathway for decarbonization, and information on other potential retrofits, and of course, rebates. And this may be exactly what you need to get started. So now that you have all that information at no cost and hopefully little risk, you can start to make some decisions. And the benchmarking and opportunities assessment that I mentioned are items that can be brought to your leadership group to help you select buildings and projects that you'd like to move forward with, or at least investigate further. So now that you've identified your preliminary scope, you can start to target different levels of funding. If it's a single measure project at this point, it's likely just a rebate you're going after, and BCNPHA can assist with that process. If it's a multi-measure project, a deep energy retrofit, then you'll need a lot more money for soft costs like design and planning work, and you'll want to consider working with the development consultant and/or project manager and including their costs in the soft cost funding request. And then you're also going to, at the same time, have to consider what capital funding programs you're targeting. Federal organizations like CMHC have multiple funding streams with different eligibility requirements with respect to energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions reduction. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities has multiple funding streams of their own, including a stream for capital retrofits. Each have different application deliverables. So you need to include those associated costs with your soft cost funding application as well. And to note, they can also have different lead times for their application processing and requirements on when these funds have to be spent. So this all needs to be considered when scheduling your project. Okay, so you've got your scope identified, your soft cost funding in place, and your capital funding applications started. Now you're moving on to the planning and development stage. So in this stage, you're completing your reports, your feasibility studies, financial performance, budget, permits, and finalizing your equipment design, among other things. Some of these items will be deliverables for those capital funding applications, and those applications can be finalized with our support. And for retrofit projects, this will likely be a combination of funding sources from the federal organizations I mentioned, stacked with provincial and utility rebates. There may be 5 or more sources of funding for one deep energy retrofit. So it's important to ensure, well, it's critical to ensure the capital funding agreements are in place before the work starts. BCNPHA and AHMA can work with your consultants to help with us. And this stage is also a great time to start connecting with your tenants through tenant outreach. So once we have those funding agreements confirmed, signed, the system designs are finalized, contractors selected, scheduling and staging can begin. This is a pre-construction phase. You should note that there are times between the funding agreements where the cash flow can be challenging, as you need to start some of these items, but you don't have those other funding agreements in place yet. Bridge financing has been utilized in some cases, but this can be costly, and other organizations were able to carry those costs. Again, working with a development consultant and good project management to expedite these final stages can be helpful for societies and groups in mitigating these challenges. Okay, and then finally, project implementation, what hopefully is the fun part. I'd like to highlight tenant relocation at this point. We've seen some projects where tenants are able, where the project's looking to replace envelope items and install space heating systems in just one day per unit. And in other cases, that takes multiple days and it's staged, but it allows the tenants to remain in place and just relocate for the day when needed. Other housing organizations are fortunate in that they're able to provide temporary relocation options for short term and other buildings within their portfolio. But it's important to have a plan. BCNPHA can support with the final stages of project wrap-up, like submitting rebates and funding documents. It's also important to ensure with your project manager that all systems have been commissioned and are operating in heating and cooling conditions as expected. Post-retrofit, BCNPHA can reassess your energy use profile and how that has improved post-retrofit. But this takes time, so it's critical to ensure everything is working as expected well before the warranties start to expire. And then, after all this, with your increased capacity, your team in place, why not move out onto another building to retrofit? Next slide. So, BCNPHA and AHMA are able to help provide some of the extra capacity needed to undertake projects like this at no cost to nonprofit and Indigenous housing providers through the Deep Retrofit Accelerator initiative. BCNPHA and AHMA have partnered with ZEBx and other organizations to accelerate deep energy retrofits in BC and share these resources and learnings across different sectors. Today, we've discussed the support this initiative will provide to non-market and Indigenous housing providers at all stages of undertaking deep energy retrofits, from education to starting the discovery stage, planning, and then project implementation. I encourage you to reach out to us and work with our energy specialists. It's going to take a team to drive a deep energy retrofit, so let's lower that risk, build up your team, and see what we can all accomplish together. And I'd also really like to highlight again our expertise in sourcing eligible funding. You just don't know what you don't know, and we're here to help with that. And again, we want to help, so please reach out to us for support with your projects and ideas. Now I'll pass it over to Antoine.
Hello. How's it going? just wanted to share one of our projects with one of our societies in Chilliwack. I think they're also known as Mamalat Quisam Housing Society. And these are one of our projects that are have a multiple layered of complexity when it comes to, you know, the society itself and their operating agreements with BC Housing and different sources of funding, not just from BC Housing and identifying all these different funding sources, but also trying to figure out actually what the building needs itself and understanding the society itself and its capacity and their and understanding how they can help get a project like this going and where we can help and support them in other areas. But yeah, it's this is one of the projects that are still in the early stages, and yeah, it does have a lot of complex layers to it. But what I really try to focus on with my line of work is focusing on the Indigenous lens through a lot of the work and understanding, you know, that this society is the First Nations people and that they have their own unique culture and sometimes they can have their unique language and how they work with people and just try to understand who they are as a people and how we can best celebrate that, whether it's through their building and how we do our work together and how we you know get these jobs done. But yeah, this one, when I come into a project, I look at, you know, what does the society have? Do we have any building drawings? Do we have any energy studies? And then what are the listen to the societies and what their needs and challenges are. Is it overheating? Is it, you know, what kind of systems does it have? What kind of HVAC systems? What kind of heating? Does it have cooling? Does the society want cooling? Can the building handle cooling? Do we need to upgrade any electrical? And these are just a lot of the different stuff that we have to think about and work with the society and, you know, really examine the building closely and the society closely and figure out what funding sources we got to go to and all these different requirements that Ed just talked about. We do a lot of similar stuff. But once we, you know, figure out all the new systems that we have to hit all these targets of greenhouse gas emission reductions and energy consumption, then we can finally move ahead with these projects and start helping the society, you know, look for consultants and the contractors to do this kind of work and communicate the during construction between all parties and make sure communication is clear and transparent for everybody. And just think of a lot about those things. But there is a lot of different people involved, from, you know, myself and our team at AHMA and consultants and contractors and provincial government and federal government to, you know, Fortis and Hydro, to all these different people are starting to collaborate, which I recognize and really appreciate that we're all starting to come together and help the people that need it the most. Shahed, did you want to share some insight on some of the building energy details?
Yes, if you don't mind, I can definitely add a bit to the context of the project. Thank you, Atuan, for the intro. That was very helpful. Yes, as Atuan mentioned, this is a very great example, I think, this project of how our team approached the society to mostly walk alongside them as they basically led this project. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about our societies is that, you know, they are essentially the owners, they're the leaders of the project. And as Antoine mentioned, ensuring that folks living in these buildings feel like that they belong in their own home, especially in this case, they're elders. So it makes things a bit more complex when it comes to the logistics of the project. So yeah, I think a lot of times it's listening to the stories of the tenants and the executive directors and the leadership to understand, yeah, what the priorities are, what their needs are, and translating that to, I guess, the language that we can communicate to contractors and project managers that we're working with. So as we were communicating with this society, we realized that, well, actually, maybe I can give you a bit more context of the building. It's a 23-unit building. As I mentioned, it was built for Indigenous elders. They're now living in the building. Unfortunately, as Antoine actually pointed, one of the biggest challenges in this building is that it tends to overheat during summer because of the orientation of the building. So it was turning into quite a big health risk, especially since elders living in this building. The current mechanical system, which is a gas-fired boiler, only provides heating. So there is absolutely no cooling in the building. So that was the biggest propeller, I think, for the leadership to approach us and talk about, you know, possibility to not only decarbonize, but of course improve the quality of life for the tenants who are living there. So that's how we kind of embarked on this very, very long journey, relied on energy study that we already have. But of course, a lot of the scope from that study until now has changed. Right now, the current scope is to make sure that we install in-suite mini split heat pumps so that tenants have both cooling and heating in their own suites, which is amazing because now they feel comfortable in their own homes. And in addition to that, replacing the makeup air unit that provides ventilation to the common areas with an air source heat pump, again, completely electrifying that system as well, so that we also have cooling to in the common areas. And of course, electrifying the domestic hot water, again, with an air to water heat pump. And in addition to all of this, because many, again, sitting in this room, I already know, as you decarbonize and electrify, there's a bit of a pressure when it comes to electrical bills. So to try and help to address that, and of course, to even further reducing greenhouse gas emissions, we're exploring adding solar panels to the building. So that's going to be quite an exciting addition to this project as well. So not only will it offset the electricity consumption, it could potentially help with the increased electrical bills as well. And as Antoine mentioned, electrical capacity is a concern usually with buildings. And of course, in this scenario, it was determined that we need to go through an electrical upgrade. So the suite panels, the feeders need to be upgraded to manage the electrical load, the increased electrical load. And we're in conversations with BC Hydro to understand what it needs to be done on their side. So yeah, I think this is an amazing example of, you know, an Indigenous-led project that is leading to amazing improved energy efficiency in the building, improved quality of life for tenants, of course. We are protecting the existing housing stock. And of course, it's very much so aligned with the cultural and environmental values of the Indigenous communities that are living in that region. So it's quite an exciting project, and it's in the early stages, as Antoine mentioned. So we're hoping to see where it goes. There are many different funding opportunities that we've tapped into, and there's a lot of stacking that's happening, as you can see on the list. We're using BC Housing's Capital Renewal Fund. We are applying to the Indigenous Leadership Fund, and we're hoping to take advantage of CEGA, which is Canada Greener Affordable Homes. I'm sorry, I never remember what that stands for. So because of the complexity of the project and there's so many components that it has, we have been, as Edward mentioned, a lot of times you realize that, yeah, you need to really take advantage of many, many different funding opportunities. And Antoine, did I miss anything? Please add to the context if there's more.
I think that's great. Thanks for sharing and your input, Shahed. Yeah, I just want to share again, all the different people that it takes to identify all this stuff and work together to ensure that we're, putting our best foot forward for the society and the people and the tenants that live in this building, right? That's what it comes down to for me. And our motto as AHMA is for Indigenous, by Indigenous, and understanding as the First Nations and the people living in here as the First Nations, and just living, knowing from firsthand experience of some of the differences in cultures and the differences of upbringing and relationship building, and yeah. I can share another project. You want to go to the next slide? Here's one of our projects with, again, Mamalak Quisum Housing Society located in Chilliwack. This one is an older building. They are a nonprofit society, and this project was handed over to me actually when I started as a project manager with AHMA, and I had to really, figure out what the commitments were from what funding and what the scope was for this building, and relearn to still see if those needs are being met by the scope, and work with the society during the consultant phase where we're coming up with the design drawings and specs for this is really a big total, almost a full renovation minus a few interior stuff, but we have full building envelope. We're changing the siding, the windows, the exterior doors. We're actually adding an elevator. We're retrofitting an elevator into this building because this building really supports a lot of elders, and they have to walk up and down the stairs. And that's something that we actually did in elevator feasibility study. And this is more of a project, that was mostly electric already, and figuring out how can we support the elderlies and the overheating. And what we did is actually installed PTAC units. They are portable, I forget what they are, but they're similar to what you have in the hotel rooms, right? They got heating and cooling through the wall. So each unit now has heating and cooling, but still has existing baseboard electric heating. Package terminal air conditioner. Thank you, Sarah. So we have changed also the rooftop unit, and we have fully renovated two units to be fully accessible. And this will help the tenants move up and down, but also have specific rooms for new tenants. But yeah, we just doing as much as we can now with what the budget we have, and once we do finish the project, if we have funding left over, then we'll go back and see what we can do with funds left. But there's yeah, a lot of different complex layers to this, understanding this is society and their operating agreements, or if they have operating agreements, it would be a different story. So just understanding those requirements for the operating agreements themselves and the requirements for the funding, and yeah, listening to the needs and and the challenges of the building itself and the society and the people living in there, right? That's and yeah, we're right in construction now, so I think all the siding and the building envelope is completed. We're just starting to focus on the elevator and kind of the lobby renovations. But yeah, this project I think started back in like 2019, so this project has been really a long time coming, and I'm looking forward to getting this project completed. Thank you. I'll pass it on to whoever is next. Oh, myself. Next slide, sorry. Yeah, so something that I really, I try to encourage and think about with all our societies, because I know we're all different First Nations, and this is something that I really try to share with, within my team and within our organization, and something that's big for all the First Nations people, right? And sharing and celebrating, what it means to be First Nations, how can we incorporate that into all our services and buildings, and be inclusive and respectful to Indigenous cultures and traditions. So that's something that, I think of, the different ways of each society could be a different First Nations. They could have their different culture, language. They could have a different way of living or way of gathering. They could have different building practices, different building materials. Some people might like to use the round wooden logs. Some people might like to use stone, but it's just really thinking about all those different things and how we can incorporate that into our buildings so everybody can be proud of where we live, and be proud of the building itself, right? Inside and out. And these are some of the terms that we've actually come up with to incorporate through one of the programs that we run, the CMHC co-investment, in trying to really include it through an accessibility, like a cultural accessibility, and how we can quantify it through building design, or something in that nature, but try to really keep it vague so we can um, identify all this different stuff for the First Nations. I'm not gonna go through all of these, but yeah, you get the I think you get the idea. This I could share a little bit about this project here in this picture. It's in Terrace, and this is a beautiful artwork done by a local artist, incorporated into the work together with our project manager and the contractor and a consultant, and did a big reveal. And this is like a 3-story high sheet metal artwork here. And yeah, this is the type of stuff that, I like to try and incorporate to all our buildings in one way or another, whether it's on the outside or something on the interior, whether it's, artwork displayed or murals painted right into your walls. I know a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but there are certain cultures that do celebrate totem poles, which is great. We do see a lot of that. But yeah, this language here is their own language and text, and that's their sign that they put up. So yeah, thank you, everybody. Is there another slide? Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you, everybody, for for listening and joining us.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your experience on these projects and more generally describing the process of this offering through NPHA and AHMA. I thought I'd kick things off with a first question that might be leaning towards Edward, and potentially Shahed would be able to answer this question of what advice do you have for nonprofit housing providers considering a deep energy retrofit? There's been a lot of discussion in the chat about funding, and I just wanted to open that up to you folks.
I think I see a lot of projects where I was actually just on a call with someone yesterday where they've done great work. They've started on a study, but then sort of as I mentioned in my part of my presentation, they didn't really consider other items that they would need for their building and for the total project. So I think they got into a position where they had a big expensive study done, and then they just couldn't really move on to the next step. So I think it's really, connecting with us as early as possible so that we can try to work with you to ensure the deliverables you're working on now will land somewhere in the future logically that can then be applied to the next step, and you're not stuck in kind of a situation where you just don't know what to do. Shad?
Oh no, that's great. Maybe out to that I would add, if you are considering any honestly retrofit project, especially a deep retrofit project, because of its complexities, I would highly recommend engaging with your tenants and residents in the building early on, because you potentially might face disruptions, and you never know because of the complexity of the project. And I think the sooner you engage with them, the sooner you start having conversations with them, it's going to be much easier for you to get them on board and minimize that impact on their lives, because they're the ones again living in that building. We have a lot of amazing examples of our members having that really open communication channel with their tenants, and it makes a huge difference when you actually have that communication channel, and you won't face a lot of resistance from your tenants. And I think that's something I would add to. I'm not sure if anybody else in the panel has any other recommendations or thoughts.
I'll just say too, I think, Chad, that's a great point, because it kind of sets up the later point. And like when your system's installed, again, like you really need to work with your tenants to ensure you reach those energy savings. You can have like the best system ever designed, installed, and if your tenants don't know how to operate it, you're going to lose a lot of the savings right there. So kind of starting with them early, kind of building up that engagement and buy-in. We've seen that be really successful then when it comes to using the new equipment.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and certainly relevant beyond just, NPHA, relevant to all retrofits, that buy-in. Even Etwan, like you were also speaking to this, that you really have to listen in, like talk to people who are living in these spaces, and then you find the best solution. I'll pass things over to Darla to ask our next question.
It's Natalie. I'm just wondering if the panel might be able to elaborate on what they're hearing from like the nonprofit owners versus kind of what they're hearing from tenants, and those different voices and how they're represented in the process. And do they have different needs that we need to be aware of? And likewise, kind of how, if they're not coming to you with the decarb lens front of mind, how do you introduce that into the conversation in a way that reflects their needs first and then kind of adds value longer term, or like adds that extra bit?
I can share a bit of my work and how we go about it. We think of the systems itself and what the owners and operators have to deal with when they're have to actually operate the building. What's the maintenance like for these systems, for these HVAC buildings? What does it take to how many filters do we got to change? How many light bulbs are there that we might have to take care of? And all these different maintenance items for a building that takes to operate the building, but also thinking about the tenants, when they're living in these suites, what what does the the kitchen look like for us? You know, we look at those details. What's the flooring like? What's the condition of that flooring? Does that need to be updated, you know, and all those different things. Does, you know, does the bathrooms work? Some people don't share that their, you know, faucets or bathrooms aren't running properly, and they're scared to share that for some reason, right? And it's just really um kind of opening that door to that communication, so we can find out those small details that the owner might not never known about, right? So that's kind of the difference is how we go about that. But also for the tenants, you know, we got to think about when the contractors have to go in their suite and what that entails and how that affects the tenants, right? Because when somebody goes in and, you know, I'll ask anybody, how would you feel if some stranger came into your house and say, well, I gotta come and do work, right? So it's just gotta prepare yourself and prepare the society and give them all a heads up and make sure that, you know, they're fully aware of the work that needs to be done, when it's going to be done, and who's going to be there, and if we need to have, you know, extra security for these certain sensitive peoples that, you know, maybe a lot of the, well, not, I wouldn't say a lot, but there are some societies that are, you know, are running shelters and running safe homes and stuff in that nature. So we got to think about those other things too sometimes.
Yeah, and I think with respect to like the organization side and how they may approach decarb, it is more rare in our sector, but there are some organizations that do prioritize decarbonization, and you know, taking that approach throughout their entire portfolio. There's other organizations, quite a few of them, that prioritize capital replacement and simply like, you know, hey, our building's aging, you know, the systems are all past system life. We need to you know, identify this and identify a solution. And then there actually are some that really are, they come to us and they really want to install cooling. So it's kind of like from each one of those situations, there could be a pathway to decarbonization. Obviously, the first one, you want to go there anyway, great. The second one, it's like you want to address capital replacement items. Well, like we've kind of alluded to today with like CMHC, SIGA, and FCM, there's a lot of money for capital out there. Now you have to meet their deliverables. So that's one way that you might get and follow the money. And the last is really like to add cooling. You know, again, you can combine sort of those latter two. Okay, you can use these funding programs, you can decarbonize and add cooling. So that's also you know, a benefit that's really you know, considered. So I think when I talk to organizations, I really want to understand, you know, like what's their vision for these projects? Like what are they trying to achieve? Because I think that's gonna, you might end up in the same place, but you may have to get there slightly different. And then from there, it's like, okay, like what programs are out there that can support these type of initiatives, and how can we combine them all and to make it work?
Okay, I'm going to jump in with another question here. I know that there are folks on the call that are less on the they're development consultants. They're consultants working on these projects, and they want to understand what is the BC RA and Retrofit Accelerator really offering. What would you really want development consultants to know about MPHA and AHMA's retrofit support services, or for Darla through the strata support service? How can we best collaborate on that? Anything come to mind, Edward, Shahed, Itwan, Darla?
Yeah, it's really easy for me. Just if you're a nonprofit housing provider or co-op, reach out to me as soon as possible, or if you're representing one. We, you know, if you're a development consultant, you know, you probably know what you're doing, and you've done it before, but there are a lot of funding opportunities you may not be aware of. And there's a lot of items, like when we talk like an early opportunities assessment, you know, some organizations might spend thousands of dollars on that. That's something that we can do in-house. So it's really kind of allowing us to provide your client with that value and working with us on these different items. We can take some things off your plate. Perhaps if, you know, some applications are lagging, we can help expedite those and really just help strengthen the team overall. while not adding a cost to the project, which is quite a benefit, and hopefully kind of minimizing the risk along the way. So that relationship might look different between us and different development consultants, but really we have our services and we'd like to provide them to the nonprofit sector where possible. So please reach out to me.
Yeah, I would just echo that. Just definitely reach out to Sarah and Edward. They're amazing. So yeah, I would highly recommend starting that conversation.
Darla, do you have any reflections?
Yeah, I think I would just echo what Edward said, that, we see ourselves in all of the different support program streams. It's really about working with the consultants in a lot of ways. And the services like this, they can answer a lot of those questions for the owners and even for the tenants, that help them get a better understanding of what's happening in their building. And I think overall helps the projects run more efficiently. So we see ourselves as kind of working with them, maybe doing some of that supports, particularly in the beginning of a project where there's lots of questions, and kind of education or just general background knowledge that we help to fill in.
Okay, well, it seems like we're coming to the end of the hour. I thought I'd give Darla maybe one last chance to pitch, the BCRA, and remind everyone that this is a service across BC. Darla, do you want to say any last words before we close out for the day?
No, I know that there's been a great discussion happening in the chat. So again, if you have a nonprofit housing or a charitable housing provider, or one of the Indigenous housing providers, please do reach out to Sarah and Edward. It's a great starting point for your organization, and it's really there to help you navigate these things. If you're in a commercial building, if you're in a strata building, if you're in a market rental building, I encourage you to go to the BC Retrofit Accelerator page on the ZEBx website. And then through there, we can put you directly in touch with the program providers. Then you can learn a little bit more about those programs. Everyone's slightly different and kind of targeted for that particular sector. So with any questions, I encourage you to head on over there. And just thanks again to our panelists today. I learned a lot, and it's always such a great grounding to see what's happening in the real world, in those actual buildings and projects. Just appreciate that perspective. Thanks again.
Absolutely. And the people inside, the tenants, and all the folks that we're serving. So that's it for today. Thank you, everyone. And a massive thank you to the presenters for sharing all their insights. Looking forward to joining you guys all, hopefully in the new year, at our next Decarb Lunch that will probably happen at the end of January. So thanks all for coming, and happy holidays.